In a seismic shift that could reshape the economic landscape of West Africa and challenge long-standing colonial legacies, the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, comprising Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, has officially launched a new common currency today, dubbed the Sahel Eco. This bold move marks a definitive break from the West African CFA franc, a currency system long criticized for its ties to French monetary control. Backed by the region's vast reserves of gold and uranium, the Sahel Eco is positioned as a resource-anchored powerhouse, potentially emerging as one of the most stable and influential currencies on the global stage amid rising commodity prices and geopolitical tensions. The announcement came during a high-profile summit in Niamey, where AES leaders, Burkina Faso's President Ibrahim Traore, Mali's Colonel Assimi Goïta, and Niger's General Abdourahmane Tiani, unveiled the currency's framework. This is not just a financial instrument, it is our declaration of true independence, declared President Traore, who recently assumed the rotating presidency of the AES on December 24. The leaders emphasized that the Sahel Eco will eliminate the requirement for member states to deposit foreign exchange reserves with the French Treasury, a contentious feature of the CFA system that has funneled billions in African wealth to Paris over decades. To understand the profundity of this launch, one must delve into the convoluted history of the CFA franc and the AES's formation. The CFA franc, originally standing for Colonies Françaises d'Afrique, before being rebranded as Communauté Financière Africaine, was introduced in 1945 by France to maintain economic dominance over its West African colonies. Pegged to the French franc, and later the euro, at a fixed rate, it required participating countries to hold at least 50% of their foreign reserves in France, granting Paris veto power over monetary policy and ensuring a steady flow of low-interest loans to the French economy. Critics, including Pan-African economists and activists, have long labeled it a neo-colonial tool, arguing that it stifles local development by prioritizing French interests. For instance, studies estimate that France has earned hundreds of billions in seigniorage and investment returns from these reserves since independence eras in the 1960s. The AES itself emerged from a cauldron of political upheaval. Formed initially as a mutual defense pact in September 2023 amid coups in all three nations, Mali in 2020 to 2021, Burkina Faso in 2022, and Niger in 2023, the alliance evolved into a full confederation by July 2024. These military-led governments, facing sanctions from the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, and threats of intervention, withdrew from ECOWAS in January 2025 after a year-long notice period. This exit was not merely symbolic. It reflected a broader rejection of Western influence, including the expulsion of French and U.S. troops, the pivot toward Russian security partnerships, such as the Wagner Group, and alliances with powers like China, Iran, and Turkey for infrastructure and trade. Economic grievances fueled this trajectory. The Sahel region, plagued by jihadist insurgencies, climate-induced famines, and resource exploitation, has seen little benefit from its wealth. Mali and Burkina Faso are among the world's top gold producers, with Mali extracting over 70 tons annually and Burkina Faso around 50 tons. Yet foreign multinationals like Canada's Barrick Gold and Australia's Resolute Mining have historically dominated profits. Niger, meanwhile, holds some of the planet's richest uranium deposits, supplying up to 5% of global demand. But deals with firms like France's Orano have been accused of underpayment and environmental neglect. In 2025 alone, AES nations renegotiated contracts, nationalized key mines, and built local refineries to capture more value, steps that laid the groundwork for today's currency launch. At its core, the Sahel Eco is designed as a commodity-backed currency, drawing inspiration from historical gold standards but adapted to modern realities. Unlike the CFA's euro peg, which exposes it to European inflation and policy whims, the new currency will maintain a floating exchange rate initially stabilized by a basket of assets, primarily gold from Mali and Burkina Faso's mines, and uranium from Niger's Arlit region. AES officials claim this backing could make the Sahel Eco the most powerful currency in the world right now, citing soaring global gold prices, hovering above $2,500 per ounce amid US-China trade wars, and uranium surge, over $100 per pound due to nuclear energy demands in Europe and Asia. Practically, the system involves creating a central AES monetary authority, headquartered in Ouagadougou, to manage issuance and reserves. Member states will pool 30% of their gold and uranium output into a confederal vault with blockchain technology, potentially supported by Russian or Chinese partners, ensuring transparency and anti-counterfeiting measures. No longer will reserves sit in French banks. Instead, they will fund regional projects like the newly established Confederal Investment and Development Bank, BCID AES, launched earlier this month with an initial capital of 500 billion CFA francs, about $895 million. This bank, financed by import levies and member contributions, aims to finance agriculture, energy grids, and industrialization, areas where CFA constraints have historically limited borrowing. The transition plan is ambitious. Starting January 1, 2026, the Sahel ECO will circulate alongside the CFA for a 6-month dual period, with full replacement by mid-year. Businesses and citizens in the AES's combined 52 million population, as of 2025 estimates, will exchange CFA at a 1:1 rate initially, backed by the commodity reserves. To ease adoption, the alliance has introduced incentives like zero-fee remittances within the bloc and tax breaks for using the new currency in trade. Already, the AES has harmonized policies: a common biometric passport in January 2025, a unified flag in February, energy cooperation in May, and a joint military force, FU-AES, of 5,000 troops just last week on December 20th. The implications extend far beyond borders. For France, this is a body blow. The CFA zone, encompassing 14 African nations, provides Paris with economic leverage and a stable euro buffer. Losing the AES trio, which contributes significantly to UEMOA's GDP through resources, could trigger a domino effect, with countries like Senegal or Côte d'Ivoire eyeing reforms. French President Emmanuel Macron's administration has already voiced concerns over stability, while the European Central Bank warns of potential inflation pass-throughs. Meanwhile, Russia and China stand to gain. Moscow's Rosatom has inked uranium deals with Niger, and Beijing's Belt and Road investments in Sahel infrastructure could accelerate with a de-Francized economy. In Africa, reactions are mixed. ECOWAS, still smarting from the AES split, fears fragmentation, but Pan-African voices hail it as a model for sovereignty. This could inspire a renaissance, noted Ghanaian economist Dr. Amina Bello in a recent interview, pointing to how resource backing might insulate against dollar hegemony. Yet challenges loom. Insurgencies in the Liptako-Gourma border region could disrupt mining, and global commodity volatility. Gold dipped 10% in Q3 2025 due to Fed rate hikes, poses risks. This currency launch represents more than a monetary reform. It's a frontal assault on the entrenched system of Western aid that has long been accused of perpetuating dependency across Africa. For decades, international financial institutions like the World Bank, IMF, and bilateral donors from Europe and the US have provided loans, grants, and technical assistance to Sahel nations, often framed as benevolent support for development. However, critics argue these aids, a term laden with irony, evoking both assistance and the debilitating disease, have functioned as modern chains, binding African economies to Western agendas. The Sahel ECO, by design, severs these ties entirely, redirecting resource revenues inward and eliminating the need for conditional aid packages that demand austerity measures, privatization of public assets, and alignment with donor foreign policies. Delving into the mechanics of this dependency reveals a pattern rooted in post-colonial dynamics. Post-independence, countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger inherited economies geared toward exporting raw materials to Europe while importing finished goods, a structure reinforced by aid. For instance, between 2000 and 2024, the three AES nations received over $50 billion in official development assistance, ODA, from Western sources, according to OECD data compilations. Yet, much of this aid came with strings. IMF structural adjustment programs in the 1980s and 1990s forced budget cuts that slashed education and health spending, leading to social unrest and insurgencies. In Niger, U.S. aid through USAID often prioritized counterterrorism over local needs, while French development agency AFD projects favored French contractors, recycling funds back to Paris. This boomerang aid phenomenon, as termed by economists like Dambisa Moyo in her seminal work Dead Aid, ensured that up to 80% of aid dollars never left donor countries, fostering corruption, debt traps, and a cycle of poverty. By 2025, AES external debt hovered at 60 to 80% of GDP, with servicing costs devouring budgets. Mali alone paid $300 million annually to creditors, funds that could have built hospitals instead. With the Sahel Eco's commodity backing, AES leaders assert they've neutralized this bondage. Gold and uranium reserves, now fully sovereign, generate direct revenue without intermediary lenders. Projections from the AES Monetary Authority suggest that annual gold exports alone could yield $5 to $7 billion in 2026, up from $3 billion under previous regimes due to nationalized mining and higher royalties. Uranium from Niger's Somaire and Cominac mines, renegotiated post-2023 coup to exclude French concessions, adds another $1 to $2 billion. This influx, unencumbered by aid conditions, allows for autonomous fiscal planning. No more IMF-mandated privatizations that sold off utilities to foreign firms. Instead, the BCID AES Bank can issue low-interest loans in Sahel Eco for domestic priorities, insulated from Western sanctions that crippled economies after the coups. Freed from aid dependencies, the AES is poised to channel these revenues into a massive infrastructure overhaul, addressing chronic underdevelopment that has left the region with some of Africa's lowest human development indices. Historically, Western aid funded piecemeal projects, a dam here, a school there, but often at inflated costs and with little integration. For example, the EU's $1.5 billion Trans-Saharan Highway Initiative stalled amid bureaucratic hurdles and security issues, while US-backed electrification efforts reached only 20% of rural populations. Now, with sovereign funds, AES plans mirror China's no-strings infrastructure model but adapted locally. Take transportation. The alliance has earmarked 40% of initial Sahel Eco reserves for a confederation-wide railway network. Drawing from pre-existing plans like the 1,200 kilometers Bamako-Ouagadougou-Niamey line, proposed in 2018 but derailed by funding shortages, the project could now expand to 3,000 kilometers, linking gold mines to ports and integrating with Algerian corridors for Mediterranean access. Russian engineers, already involved in Niger's rail upgrades since 2024, could accelerate this, reducing transport costs by 50% and boosting intra-AES trade from $2 billion to $10 billion annually. Similarly, road networks. Burkina Faso's Route Nationale 1 upgrades, previously aid-dependent and incomplete, can now be fully paved, cutting travel times and facilitating agricultural exports. Healthcare transformation is another pillar. The Sahel's health systems, ravaged by Ebola echoes, COVID-19, and ongoing malaria epidemics, have relied on WHO and Gates Foundation grants that prioritize vaccines over systemic builds. With Sahel Eco funds, AES envisions 500 new hospitals and clinics by 2030, starting with modular facilities in insurgency-hit zones. Mali's plan to nationalize pharmaceutical production, using uranium royalties to import Iranian generic drug tech, could slash medicine costs by 70%. Education follows suit. Niger's literacy rate of 35% could rise with 1,000 new schools, teacher training programs, and free tuition policies funded by gold-backed bonds. These aren't hypotheticals. Early 2025 AES decrees already allocated $500 million for pilot projects, including solar-powered schools in rural Burkina Faso, bypassing Western green aid that often favors European solar firms. Energy and agriculture round out the vision. Uranium-backed revenues could fuel nuclear microreactors for stable power, ending blackouts that cost economies 2 to 4% of GDP yearly. Chinese partnerships, unhindered by aid politics, might extend the Belt and Road to irrigate 1 million hectares via Niger River dams, combating desertification and famine. This self-reliance extends to defense. FU AES forces, now funded internally, reduce vulnerability to US AFRICOM withdrawals or French Barkhane pullouts. Labeling this a very strong and smart move understates its geopolitical cunning. By commodity backing the Sahel Eco, AES exploits global shifts, gold's safe haven status amid US debt crises and uranium's renaissance in net zero pushes, to create a currency resilient to sanctions. Unlike Zimbabwe's failed 2009 gold-backed ZIM dollar, undermined by hyperinflation, the AES's confederation structure ensures pooled stability, with blockchain audits preventing mismanagement. It's a nod to Libya's Gaddafi-era dinar ambitions but executed amid multipolar alliances. Russia's Wagner provides security for mines, Iran's drones bolster borders, and Turkey's Bayraktar tech aid surveillance, all without the quid pro quo of Western aid. This strategy also amplifies bargaining power. ECOWAS neighbors, still CFA tied, may face competitive devaluation if Sahel eco appreciates, pressuring reforms. Globally, it challenges dollar dominance. AES talks with BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Hint at commodity swaps, bypassing SWIFT. Yet, risks lurk. Commodity price crashes, like the 2015 oil slump that hurt peers, could strain reserves. Internal governance, military junta's accountability, remains a wild card, with potential for elite capture echoing aid-era corruption. As the world watches, this pivot raises profound questions. How will Western powers respond? With tariffs on Sahel exports or covert destabilization? Can AES sustain unity amid ethnic tensions? And what precedents does this set for other African blocs, like the East African community's stalled shilling? Central to the Sahel ECO's architecture is its role in fostering seamless trade in mineral resources among AES member states, creating a closed-loop economy that recirculates value internally rather than exporting it abroad. Under the old CFA regime, minerals like gold from Mali's Siama mine or uranium from Niger's Imuraran deposit were often sold on global markets in euros or dollars, with proceeds partially parked in French reserves. A system that drained an estimated $500 million annually from these economies through transaction fees and exchange losses alone, according to Brookings Institution analyses of CFA dependencies. Now, with the Sahel ECO, Burkina Faso can purchase Malian gold directly in the new currency to fuel its jewelry and electronics industries, while Mali acquires Nigerian uranium for emerging energy projects, all without foreign intermediaries. This intra-trade mechanism, outlined in AES summit declarations, mandates that 60% of mineral exports stay within the bloc, priced in Sahel ECO and settled via the BCID AES clearinghouse. Early pilots in 2025, such as Niger's uranium swaps for Burkina Faso's agricultural machinery, have already demonstrated efficiency gains. Transaction times dropped from weeks to hours, and costs by 30%, per internal AES reports. This isn't mere barter. It's a sophisticated velocity-driven model where increased usage amplifies the currency's value. Drawing from economic theories like those in resource-backed currencies proposed in academic papers on AES monetization, the Sahel ECO's strength derives from its commodity peg. Each transaction, say, a ton of gold bought for infrastructure bonds, injects liquidity, boosting demand and thus the currency's exchange rate against fiat like the dollar. If usage doubles in 2026 as projected, with intra-AES trade hitting $15 billion for minerals alone, the backing asset's value could appreciate 20 to 30%, per simulations in Munich Personal Re-PEC archive studies on similar systems. This creates a virtuous cycle. More trade means more reserves accumulated, hedging against volatility and turning the Sahel into a self-sustaining economic fortress. Critics of the CFA, like those in LSE blogs, have long argued that French oversight stifled such dynamics by enforcing export-oriented policies that favored European buyers. But the Sahel ECO flips the script, prioritizing regional reinvestment. In a stirring address at the launch, AES leaders extended an open invitation to fellow African nations to join the Confederation, framing it as a bulwark against exploitation. The time has come to dismantle the tools of control, proclaimed Colonel Goida, explicitly branding ECOWAS as a Western proxy designed to perpetuate resource plunder and political subservience. This sentiment echoes widespread critiques. Z-Network articles detail how ECOWAS interventions, like threats against Niger post-2023 coup, align with French interests in uranium security, while Foreign Policy Research Institute analyses note its deference to external powers, fueling accusations of neocolonialism. X-platform discussions amplify this, with users labeling ECOWAS a puppet organization that preserves colonial masters' agendas, as seen in posts criticizing its ineffectiveness and foreign funding dependencies. Delving deeper, ECOWAS's structure, born in 1975 amid Cold War alignments, has been lambasted for embedding neo-colonial mechanisms, particularly through the CFA's linkage to French treasury guarantees, which critics like those in New Left Review argue fail to deliver stability while facilitating capital outflows to Europe. Reuters reports highlight AES nations' recent ICC withdrawal, decrying it as a tool of neo-colonial repression, mirroring broader disillusionment with Western-backed institutions. Proponents of joining AES point to tangible benefits. Senegal or Guinea could leverage their bauxite and iron ore in Sahel eco-trades, escaping CFA pegs that, per Christian Science Monitor, symbolize unequal Franco-African ties. Already, Chad and Mauritania have expressed interest in observer status, per diplomatic leaks, potentially expanding the bloc to control 15% of Africa's mineral output. Yet, this call isn't without controversy. Balanced views from sources like International Banker warn that ECOWAS fragmentation could exacerbate regional instability, while UNU-CRIS analyses question if it's truly decolonizing or merely shifting dependencies to new partners like Russia. Ex-users from Nigeria and Ghana debate this, with some defending ECOWAS's role in democracy protocols, others decrying it as obsolete. As the Sahel Eco begins circulation tomorrow, the world braces for aftershocks. This isn't just a currency, it's a manifesto for African self-determination, challenging empires old and new. Whether it sparks a continent-wide renaissance or ignites rivalries remains the unfolding story of 2026. For now, the AES stands defiant, its golden uranium glow illuminating a path out of the shadows.